not starting over. Okay, anyway, thanks for remembering that, Britt. I got to see them run their race and finish well. I got to see how they consistently chose obedience. I remember reading my grandma Hannah's prayer journal, and she talked about, she's on a very limited fixed income and in a small town, and she talked about having a conversation with the Lord, and that he asked her to give additional 10% to missions. And so she said, I talked to him about it, and I'm gonna do that. So she journaled all of that, and so I got to see them both consistently choose obedience and drawing near to the Lord through their Bible study and their prayer time, and wrestling with the why and how of suffering, yet through that remaining faithful in the middle of it, and then confidently resting. Even in the middle of remaining faithful and wrestling with suffering, they confidently rested in the assurance of where they were going to spend eternity and the promises of the Lord. It taught me so much about what that looks like to run your race, and I probably shared this before, but I still don't fully understand the why around my mom, not having my mom around for the last 34 years, my kids not getting to know her, but I will tell you, in the last 3 years, it has become really clear that I get to share her story, and so that's really important to me. I did watch both my grandma Hannah, and my mom grow consistently and keep their eyes fixed on the prize, on Jesus, and move upward and forward simultaneously. The author of Hebrews understood the power of telling your story, and the power of testimony, and the power of a faithful example. He understood our human need for examples of the faithful that have gone before us, showing us what is possible and how we can do the same. So we wrapped up last week in chapter 10 with that summary statement that wraps up the second big section of Hebrews, the supremacy of Christ's work. And we're going to start there. We're going to pick up verses 19 through 23, and then we'll move all the way tonight through chapter 12. So then next week we'll conclude with just chapter 13. Okay, so Hebrews 10, 19 through 25. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain, that is, through his flesh, and since we have a great high priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, and our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience, and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, all the more as you see the day drawing near. So the author summarizes that whole teaching, and then he gives 3 really powerful exhortations that really are setting up the last 3 chapters of the book, and this is what he'll kind of expound on. So this is where you see on this, we're going to look at that, and it's at the end of your packet. Okay, it'll go in your appendix when you're all done, but for tonight it's there. Okay, now these can also be included as you went through your homework, and you may have listed instructions and warnings and things about Jesus and God. It's going to be duplicate, but for tonight we're just going to look at this because we're going to capture everything on one piece of paper because it'll all make more sense. Okay, so verse 22, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. And then verse 23, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promises faithful. Verse 24, let us consider how to stir one another to love and good works, encouraging one another, Okay, what do you see? I mean, I highlighted it for you, but what do you see?
Faith, hope, and love.
This is why many people believe Paul wrote this, because it's the theme of the end, and it's kind of throughout, but there are so many of the same things that Paul said in this letter. So, really what we're going to see as we go through is that primarily chapter 11 is going to talk about faith, chapter 12 about hope, and chapter 13 about love. It's a little mixed up like he always does. He plants a little seed or a little thought, and then he comes back and expounds. So we'll see that. We'll be jumping around a bit, but primarily these three exhortations are where he wants to land with the, as he summarizes, the supremacy of faith in Christ. Okay, so let us draw near. That word draw near, I gave you that, is to come to approach or draw near. We've seen this before. The difference here is the verb tense in draw near is present. It's present tense. It means it's a continuous and ongoing action. It's not a one-time act. It's a continuous and ongoing action of drawing near. It's a continual partaking of the incredible invitation to live in the nearness to God which Christ has secured for us. Okay, imagine how this Jewish audience has felt, where their entire, upbringing and going according to the law was that they were not allowed to approach the throne, right? They were not allowed to draw near. They didn't have direct access. So he is saying, draw near consistently, continually. This is not to come just once, but to keep coming daily and throughout the day. And then the words true heart, I gave you the word true. It's from, this is what I love about this. This word true here for true heart is from the root word athletus, which literally means not hidden. So he's saying, gives us a vivid word picture of the character of the heart the writer is calling for, a heart that has nothing hidden, a true heart. Of course, God is omniscient. He can see what's going on anyway, but it's about our attitude when we draw near and come near to him with transparency and vulnerability. So then he says, come near, draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean. Okay, so we'll skip and we'll just talk about the sprinkling. You can imagine why he would use that word when we talked all about how the priest and the priest or the great high priest would sprinkle the blood. So he's saying, have your heart sprinkled clean from an evil conscience. This is in the perfect tense, which describes a past completed action with ongoing results. So this speaks of the reader's past conversion, from the moment they entered the new covenant by grace through faith. Okay, we must prepare ourselves spiritually to fellowship with God. The Old Testament priests had to go through various washings and the applying of blood on the Day of Atonement. Also, during the regular daily ministry, the priests had to wash at the laver before they entered the holy place. The New Testament Christian must come to God with a pure heart and a clean conscience. It's an internal cleaning, bringing their attention to an internal cleansing, cleaning versus the external that was prioritized through the law. The word conscience means moral consciousness. Okay, so the soul as distinguishing between what's morally good and bad, prompting to do the former and shun the latter. All humans have souls, for unbelievers driven by guilt and shame, but for believers driven by a desire for complete and full fellowship with God. Okay, so I found this interesting little fact. Since 1811, the U.S. Treasury opened and has operated a conscience fund. It's still there, I checked. When someone who has defrauded the government wants to make that right, they can anonymously send money to Washington, D.C. to ease their conscience.
What?
Wow. In 1987, the last time a total of the funds sent to that conscience fund was published, in In 1987, it had already had over 5.7 million.
Wow.
What?
And they haven't published since then, the
What do
total.
they use the money for?
It supposedly goes into a general fund.
Wow.
Oh, that's big.
Yeah,
That's wild.
You know the job.
And a lot of people with a bad conscience.
yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, I bet it's gone downhill since then. Less conscience.
Yeah.
Less contributions, conscience.
Okay, so, let's see, a full assurance of faith. I know this is out of order. I'm just gonna tell you, I told Brittany today, my computer is worse than ever. And so, I feel like by the time I get this done, I'm gonna cross the finish line, I'm gonna win. It's been such a battle today. It was going through and deleting stuff. It was like, brrr, today I have to slam the computer to save it, and then I have to undo about 40 times.
Oh.
No.
So, yeah.
That's
So
terrible.
there's lots of stuff missing, but we're just gonna work through it.
Spiritual.
Yeah, we are winning this one. So, anyway, let's go back and look at full assurance of faith, most certain confidence, and abundance of confidence. Not it's this a true heart and full assurance of faith is not hesitant faith. It is deep, unshakable confidence that Christ's work has opened the way to the throne of God, the holy place. It is a full conviction engendered by faith. It pictures faith that is completely filled up, overflowing, and confident. It is settled, sure conviction that Christ's sacrifice has secured access to God. Okay, so that's verse 22. Let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience, and our bodies washed with pure water. Okay, verse 23. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. We've seen most of these words before. I gave them to you again. We talked a lot about confession. We've seen the word hope. The word wavering means not bending, to be firm or unmoved. That word wavering, aklines, is another hapax legomena, so that's the only time in the Bible this word wavering is used. It's the only time. So let us hold fast, hang on to the verbal declaration of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And then verse 24, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. Okay? This word consider, kantoneo, is to perceive, observe, understand, to consider attentively, to fix one's eyes or mind on. It's the same word we saw in 3:1, where it said, let us consider Jesus, the apostle and high priest of our confession, same word. And then stir up means, it's a very kind of violent word almost. It means to incite or provoke. In the King James, it actually says, let us provoke one another to love and good works, which seems kind of contradictory, but the point he's making is that it's a definitive action. Okay, it's a sharpening of the feeling or action, as iron sharpens iron. Okay, and the word love here is agape. Unconditional love, charity, or affection. It's Christian love. Whether exercised towards the brethren, towards men generally, is not an impulse from feelings. It does not always run with the natural inclinations, nor does it spend itself only upon those for whom some affinity is discovered. This love seeks the welfare of all. Okay? And then good works, remembering our context, what are we coming out of? He's saying we're getting away from the law, but now he's saying love and good works, and we're going to talk a lot about that next week. Remembering not works for holiness, but rather works motivated by agape love. Okay? Works are not necessary according to the law, to the new covenant, but are a natural result of the love you experience when you're walking in the new covenant. Okay? Okay, verse 25. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another. And all the more as you see the day drawing near. Okay, I had to really dig into this. Honestly, this last like 10 through 12 has really made me stop and rethink the ESV. But
Wait, stop and rethink what?
ESV translation, because it is very much word for word versus thought for thought. But there are a lot of times where they choose a word or even remove punctuation. I'm like, why would they do that?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. So if you see, they don't have the colon when you look at it. And I went back to the Greek. It is definitely a hard pause. So it's what this is telling us is all of these things he's just said, all of these exhortations, do all of them all the more as you see the day drawing near. Not just, because if you just read it, you're thinking it means not neglecting to meet together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another all the more. That's not right. There's a very hard pause there. Okay, so it implies that they've stopped meeting, which could very much have been due to the persecution that was happening and that was coming. And this is emphasizing the community, the encouragement that comes from community when you're together. Okay, so we're going to talk more about that. All right, as you see the day, this word day here, this word day is, I've given you that, is hemera, which is the day in which Christ will return from heaven. So it's pointing to the second coming. So do these things all the more as you're waiting and looking for the second coming, for that day. When Christ will return from heaven, raise the dead, hold the final judgment, and perfect his kingdom. Okay? So then verses 26 through 31, very strong warnings, and they can be included on your warnings and instructions list, but we're not going to stop and go through those now. So, let's read those. For if we go on sinning deliberately after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a fearful expectation of judgment, and a fury of fire that will consume the adversaries. Anyone who has set aside the law of Moses dies without mercy on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much worse punishment, do you think, will be deserved by the one who has trampled underfoot the Son of God and has profaned the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified and has outraged the Spirit of grace? For we know him who said, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." And again, the Lord will judge his people. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Okay, so the word go on sinning, all I want to point out is that this is the tense of go on sinning is, it's continuous. It's a continuous action. So this is what this is saying is if the habit of your life is deliberately sinning, okay? If that's the habit of your life, if that's something that is a continuous action, we all are gonna mess up once in a while. I mean, even deliberately, you can say, you know when you are gonna make up that story that you're lying, but you do it anyway. Okay, and so then you repent and you say, I'm sorry, God, I didn't mean to do that. This is talking about the habit of your life, that this is what you do. The word deliberately means voluntarily, willfully, of one's own accord, with intent to sin. And there's that word receiving the knowledge. That means taking hold of. It means, we've seen that before, to lay hold of. So they've received the knowledge of the truth, and they're still choosing to deliberately or willfully sin. The word fearful, this word is used 4 times in chapters 10, 11, and 12. This word fearful. Frightful, formidable, fearful, terrible, dreadful. It is a fearful, terrible, dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. This word is only used in the book of Hebrews. He's the only author that used this word, fearful, terrible, or dreadful. Okay, so then I'll give you the cross references there. The fury of fire that will consume the adversaries He's taking that from Isaiah 26:11. So he's going to bring in some Old Testament here. So fury of fire that will consume the adversaries is Isaiah 26:11. And then when he talks about 2 or 3 witnesses, this is the law that was written out in Deuteronomy 17:1-7, how they would handle an issue where someone broke the law and they had to bring evidence with 2 or 3 witnesses. And there was a whole process. That's Deuteronomy 17. And then, vengeance is mine, I will repay. He's quoting Deuteronomy 32:35. And again, the Lord will judge his people. Isaiah 26. So he starts that with Isaiah 26 and then he wraps it up quoting Isaiah 26:11 again. Okay, so these are all very, very strong warnings, and you can look these up and really the words are what they are. Like has outraged, it's really what it means. There's no better word than outrage the spirit of grace. So I didn't do a lot of word studies here because it's pretty clear. Okay, verses 32-34. But recall the former days when, after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, sometimes being partners with those so treated. For you had compassion on those in prison and joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. Okay, so we get a picture of who he's talking to. It sounds like the audience are those who heard the truth, they were enlightened, they believed it, they suffered for it, lost their earthly possessions, were persecuted, and endured through it. It's easy when we're looking at the context to think these are kind of wishy-washy, kind of lukewarm, that we're tempted to turn back, but this tells us that they had been through a lot, that they had endured. They had been mistreated, their possessions had been taken away from them. The word endured is hypomeno, and it means to remain or abide under. It means to not run away from. To persevere. It's a compound word, hypo meaning remain or abide, and meno under. Remaining under misfortunes and trials to hold fast to one's faith in Christ. To endure, bear bravely and calmly. Okay? And then the word hard struggle. In the King James it says great fight of afflictions. So hard struggle is a struggle, combat. It's kind of a physical picture of battle. And then sufferings. We've seen this word, it's the afflictions. It's the same word that's used to talk about Christ's suffering or the passion of Christ. Possession is hyparxis, which means possessions, goods, wealth, property, or personal belongings. And then he says, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one, a remaining, an enduring one. It's that word meno, abiding possession. So he's comparing material possessions and personal belongings with real treasure, a belonging in heaven, an abiding possession that is secure. Okay? So that's the first thing that we're going to put in our little faith column. I put it there for you. That faith, true faith, the faith that new covenant faith holds on to a better and enduring possession. Okay? Verses 35-39. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward, for you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. For yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay. But my righteous one shall live by faith, and if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. Okay, so therefore, because you know the truth, you've suffered for it, you've lost your possessions over it, don't throw away your confidence. Don't cast it aside. This throw away your confidence is this confidence is the same word that we've seen in both of those summary statements, 4:16 and 10:19. It's talking about boldness, their boldness of faith. Don't throw it away. And then the word reward literally means a payment of wages, a recompense, a reward, or a retribution. And we've seen that word 4 times already. What I wanted to point out here, though, is the word endurance. So this is the noun form, which is so interesting because it just swaps the O and the E. Do you see that? Hypomone instead of hypomeno. That's how you tell the difference between the verb and the noun. It means to abide under, to bear it courageously, under suffering, to have patience or be long-suffering. And then preserve means to preserve or obtain to the preserving of the soul, namely that it may be made partaker of eternal salvation. Okay, so I'll tell you these where he's quoting. Yet a little while, and the coming one will come and not delay. Habakkuk 2:3 and 4. This is what he's quoting now. The prophet Habakkuk in verse 37, 38. Habakkuk 2:3 through 4, and then Revelation 22:20 is a cross reference here that I wanted to point out. Okay? So verse 39, those who have faith and preserve their souls are those who partake in eternal salvation. So on our little faith list, it's a faith that preserves our soul. Okay, so we're going to go to chapter 11. Like I said, we're going to go through this pretty quickly because we're not reading the whole thing. We're just going to pick out some of those key verses. Okay, let's read verses 1 through 3. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, for by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. So he's given us the definition of faith. Okay, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. I gave you the definition of those two words as well. So what I want you to see, the assurance of things hoped for, conviction of things not seen. What he's going to show us now is how faith and hope are linked. Okay, how they work together.
Can you say he's giving us what? Is what you said earlier? He's giving us something, faith.
The definition?
Definition? Is that what it was?
Well, he gave us the definition, yes.
Okay, I missed it.
That's okay. The definition of faith, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, and he's going to show us how faith and hope are linked, how they work together. Okay? Britt, can you go to the quote that's next?
Yes.
I love this. Matthew Henry is one of my favorite Bible scholars. Faith demonstrates to the eye of the mind the reality of those things that cannot be discerned by the eye of the body. Okay? Faith demonstrates to the eye of the mind the reality of those things that cannot be discerned by the eye of the body. For by faith the people of old received their commendation. The people of old, the ancients, those who believed in faith before us. And then the word commendation is to be a witness, to bear witness, to affirm that one has seen, heard, or experienced something. Here in 11:2, it's in the passive voice, and it means to be well testified of, to have seen, have been given a good report. Okay, so verse 3, By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. So the author is referring to faith and believing that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth by speaking it into existence. So the word visible, that's also one of those four appearances we saw last week. It's that word again. It's the word pheno, which means to appear, to be seen, to become evident, visible. We saw that in 9:8 and 26 when it talked about the appearing of Jesus, and back in 9:8, the same word for visible, when things out of things that are made to appear are made visible. Faith is both believing what was, it's telling us we have to believe that God created the world in the beginning, and hope for what's going to be. Okay? So verses 4 through 39, we're not reading. You looked at that in your homework, and it's all of those examples of faith. We're going to talk about that in our discussion time. But we're not going to read 4 through 39. I'll go through and just mention that verses 4 and 5, we saw Abel and Enoch. And then verse 6, and without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. So easy to read through this and miss that this is a two-part. It's saying, if we draw near to God, we must believe both that he exists as the one true God and he rewards those who diligently seek him. It's easy to read it and just kind of lump it all together, but it's definitely two things. Without faith, it is impossible to please him, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists as the one true God, and he rewards those who diligently and consistently seek him.
Mom, is that the same reward, the payment?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me just make sure that I do write that down. Yes, it's the same word in 11:6. Okay, so then in verse 7, he talks about Noah constructed an ark for the salvation of his household. That word for the saving of his household is soteria, which we talked a lot about when we talked about salvation and the 3 tenses of salvation, and it's the same word. So he built an ark for the salvation of his household, to rescue them from peril, to keep them alive, and he did that in faith. Okay, verses 8 through 12, we looked at Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Jacob. The key there with those is that they were all looking forward. It keeps saying they were looking forward with hopeful expectation to the heavenly city. They were looking forward. Okay, verses 13 through, am I going too fast, Lynn? Verses 13 through 16. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country. That is a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, as he has prepared for them a city. Okay? So, on your little sheet, it says that it's a faith that looks forward to a better homeland. A faith that looks forward to a better homeland. That's the example that they're giving us in those verses. Britt, I'm going to skip 14.
Okay.
In verses 17 through 31, examples of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and Moses. Moses would have been a key example based on his relationship with the law. Verses 26 and 27, he considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. There's the word again. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Okay, so the reproach of Christ is the rebuke he would suffer for his faithful obedience to God. Okay, and then in those verses we also see the example of the Israelites crossing the Red Sea, marching around Jericho, and then Rahab. Okay, so now we're down to verse 32. And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel. I mean, you get here and go, wait, you're not going to talk about David? But anyway, David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. Okay. So, let's keep going. Let's just, the word better life there, and I think it is 30, where is it? Too many verses here. 35. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they might rise again to a better life. The word better life is resurrection, anastasis. So it's faith that leads to a better life or eternal life. They were looking forward to eternal life, a better life. Verses 39 and 40. All these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. Okay, so all these commended, we've seen what that word, they got their good report, they were approved. They didn't get to see the Messiah in their lifetime. Sometimes when we read that, we think, well, God didn't answer their prayer. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about they didn't see the fulfillment of the Messiah in their lifetime. Since God had provided something better for us, because this audience, we've been able to live in the time after the Messiah came. That apart from us, they should not be made perfect. So Jewish believers plus gospel believers, well, we're the gospel believers, they're the Jewish believers, together, it's a complete. It makes that complete. That's what that means, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. Once we all came together, I really struggled with if we should go look at that, but we don't have time. We can maybe talk about it later, okay? Because there's kind of some controversy about, does that mean when Jesus died and he was in the grave 3 days that he went and he took all those righteous believers and then took him? Yes, I believe that, but not everybody does. So we're not going to talk about that tonight. But the point is that the concept or the principle of it, we couldn't be complete without each other. We had to have them, they needed to have us. Okay?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When it says the women receive back their dead by resurrection, is that because they lost, if you're a widow, you have no rights?
No. That's a good thought. But they're actually talking to like the widow of Zarephath and a few that their dead were raised back to life.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking, like, because I know, like, Martha and Mary would have lost all of their. That's part, like, because Lazarus gets risen, so I didn't know if that's what
Yes.
it was referring to that.
Yes. And the widow of Nain. I feel like because of when this was written, he may not have been actually talking about Mary and Martha as much as reflecting way back to the ancients.
Okay.
But that's just my
Okay.
feeling. But he really is literally talking about women who received their dead back.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Let's go on to chapter 12. So we've got everything so far in our faith column through chapter 11. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Okay, we've seen this verse before, these verses. Therefore, since we have all these examples of faith, he just listed all of them. Since we have this huge cloud of witnesses, and here's something else I wanted you to notice. Here in verse 12, he does a full shift to the we us.
Chapter 12.
Yes, chapter 12, thank you. He has been, giving them warnings and reprimands and saying, you all need to do this, you all need to do this, and we, and once in a while, but now he's including himself, and he's shifting to we us. So he's including himself in the group. Surrounded is the word parakemai, which means to be compassed with or encompassed around, to have around one. And this cloud is metaphorically a large, dense multitude, a throng. I always picture in my mind like the crowd of the saints and those who have gone on before cheering us from the balcony of heaven. Encouraging us to look ahead and stay faithful, to remain faithful. So you looked in your homework a lot at the lay aside every weight and the sin which clings so closely, and so we're not going to talk much about that. All I wanted to point out with that is that those could and probably do and probably should look different for each one of us. It could be attitudes, habits, relationships, too many commitments, comparison. Comparison is one of the most dangerous hindrances to running our race well. Yeah, Brittany and I just had some conversation, that's why she's sitting back there slow. And then run the race that is set before you. The race is a contest of athletes, a competition, fight, battle, or conflict. But metaphorically, here, it's talking about the course of life, the journey of life. And these words set before are really significant because it means, by God's intent, the race that was destined or appointed specifically for you. Okay? The race by God's intent that is appointed beforehand specifically for you. And then we have run your race with endurance, that is hypomone, to abide under, again, under suffering, patience, being long-suffering, patient continuance. And then looking to Jesus in heaven, fixing our eyes, to concentrate the gaze upon, to set your gaze on. And then my favorite cross-reference here for these verses in Hebrews 12 is Psalm 34:5. Thanks, sis. Those who look to him will be radiant with joy. And the word look there in the Hebrew means to regard, pay attention to, or behold. And the word radiant, nahar, means to shine, to beam, to flow like a stream. This is the only place in the Bible where this Hebrew word nahar is used to mean shine, or to beam, or to sparkle. Okay? Let's go ahead, sis. We're just going to keep going. Okay, so looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. And we've spent a lot of time, he's just bringing this back, and he's given us chapters and chapters of the work that Jesus did, enduring the cross and seated at the right hand. But the focus here is the hope of looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. So the word look to Jesus means to turn your gaze from other things and focus your attentiveness to Jesus. It's almost a physical turning. Turning your gaze from other things to focus your attentiveness to Jesus. It's not just a looking, it's a paying attention to. And we've already gone through the definitions of founder and perfecter. Those are probably already on your list. You can add the references there if you'd like. However, we've seen him talk. This is the first time that he's used the word perfecter to describe Jesus, and this is another hapax legomena, which is the only time in the Bible where Jesus is described as the perfecter of our faith. We saw in 10:14 where it said he perfected for all time those who are sanctified, and so that was the verb, and this is his title, perfecter of faith. Okay, so based on everything we've already established about the supremacy of Jesus and the work he did from founding our faith to perfecting it, we'll go on to verse 3. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. So that's the word consider, to think over, ponder, contemplate. This actually means to contemplate by comparing. He's wanting you to make a comparison here. And we've seen that's what he does in the whole book. He does so much comparison. He's wanting you to stop and compare, consider. Even better than the cloud of witnesses that we have as an example, we have the superior example in Jesus, who endured the cross, shed his blood for you. None of those other people, although they remained faithful and they set examples, they didn't shed their blood for you. Jesus is the superior example. So consider him so that you don't grow weary or faint-hearted. Okay, and then verses 5 through 11. Who wants to read that? Because anybody? You can read it off the screen if it's easier. Go ahead.
And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. The Lord disciplines the one he loves, and chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it.
Okay, so when you read through this, it sounds a little hard, doesn't it? It sounds a little hard. First of all, let me tell you in verse 5, my son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary. He's quoting from Job. What does that tell you? He decides to quote Job right here, Job 5:17. And then verse 6, for the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives, is Proverbs 3:12. And you looked at the word discipline in your homework and spent some time on that, so we're not gonna really dig into it here. We're gonna talk more about it in our discussion time. The point is, our loving God, like a loving parent, disciplines us as his children because he loves us, as his daughters. We must endure discipline so that we may share in his holiness, receive training that yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. Okay, so endure discipline as a child of God. That's what hope without wavering looks like, enduring discipline as a child of God. Okay, verses 12 through 17 crack me up a little, but let's go. Therefore, lift your drooping hands. Isn't that the funniest words? Lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. Strive for peace with everyone, and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. That no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. For you know that afterward, when he desired to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no chance to repent, though he sought it with tears. Okay, so it's here we are again with the ESV. The word "your" is left out of most translations. It infers those among them who are weary and weak. So it's lift your drooping hands is in the ESV it's here, but in most other translations, so if we take that word out, lift drooping hands and strengthen weak knees. What is that? It completely changes it, right? Because it's not about me, it's about my community. It's about those around me who need encouraged, who need to be loved, who need to be strengthened. Okay, so I would just cross that word out if you want to, but I know you're crossing out a word in the Bible, so you don't have to do that if you want to, but it's an exhortation to them as a group of believers receiving this letter to care for and hold one another accountable. Lift drooping hands, strengthen weak knees, make straight paths so that what is lame, strive for peace with everyone. That word strive, we've seen that before, dioko, to follow, to pursue. Saying pursue peace with everyone, seek after earnestly or eagerly. Okay? Pursue peace with everyone and the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. This is a strong warning that's kind of just in here. We are to pursue holiness, sanctification, growing in holiness, because if we don't, we won't see the Lord. That word see, well, first of all, holiness, hagiosmos, is consecration, purification, sanctification of heart and life. And then the word see, this is what we saw in 9:28, to gaze. It's talking about Jesus' future appearing. So what does that say? You won't see Jesus' future appearing without holiness, without sanctification. He's saying, see to it no one fails to obtain grace, that no root of bitterness springs up, that there's no sexual immorality, or that people are ungodly. It says unholy, the word means ungodly, like Esau. Esau lost sight of the value of his birthright because he was distracted by temporary hunger. He chose temporary fulfillment over eternal blessing. Saying, don't give up on your heavenly calling for temporary fulfillment, so that you can see Jesus and gaze at him face to face. Okay? All right, who wants to read verses 18 through 27? I know it's a big chunk. It'll be on the screen. if it's easier.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, that's okay, that's okay.
Hey, Lori, can I ask a clarifying question?
Uh-huh.
We're confused, is yours supposed to be in there or not?
It's there in some translations, and others it's left out. It's not in the Greek.
Okay, got it.
Some translators feel like it's inferred, and so they put it in. Because what I was looking is like, when they're saying your, they're meaning your as a group, but for most of it, that's confusing, because we hear that as my own.
Okay.
So it's not like necessarily wrong, but I feel like it's better to understand if they just leave the word out, since it's not in the Greek anyway.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
18. For you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire and darkness and gloom and a tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and a voice whose words made their hearers vague, that no further messages be spoken to them. For they cannot endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. See that you do not refuse him who is speaking, for if they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less will we escape if we reject him who warns from heaven. At that time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. This phrase, yet once more, indicates the removal of things that are shaken, that is, things that have been made, in order that the things that cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire.
Okay. So you looked at this in your homework as well, comparing these two mountains, Mount Sinai with Mount Zion. In verse 18 and verse 22, first in verse 18 it says, you have not come to. And then in verse 22, but you have come to. So he's saying you have not come to Mount Sinai, you have come to Mount Zion. And that word come to is really the words draw near. Okay, in the Greek it's draw near. So the same we saw in 4:16, 10:22, 11:6. You can't draw near to Mount Zion. Mount Sinai, I probably said that backwards. You cannot draw near to Mount Zion, but you can draw near to Mount Zion. Okay, so he's making the comparison, but really, Mount Sinai and what may be touched, he's referring to the old order, the old covenant as a whole. What happened at Mount Sinai, where the law was delivered, and everything that happened in that story, where the mountain, he's lumping that all together as an example of
I liked your motion.
scaring them. They couldn't touch it. They were scared. There was thunder. They were trembling with fear. There was trembling with fear. And he's saying you couldn't touch that. You couldn't draw near. You couldn't approach it. Okay, and so now, that was all old covenant. And now you can draw near to God and look forward to Mount Zion and eternity with him. So he's making this big comparison of what may be touched and what could not be touched. Draw near to God, the judge of all. This is all on your list. Draw near to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, through his blood that speaks a better word. Draw near to the city of the living God, heavenly Jerusalem, innumerable angels gathering. In festal, gathering means a celebration. An assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven. And draw near to the spirits of the righteous made perfect. So that's what we have to look forward to. We can draw near and approach Mount Zion. Verses 28 and 29, therefore let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. Be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Look forward to a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And the words consuming fire, he's referring to Deuteronomy 4:23 through 24. Britt, one more.
Sorry.
That's okay.
That's fine.
Take care lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make a carved image, the form of anything that the Lord your God has forbidden you. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. So he's reminding him he's still a jealous God, right? He still wants our love, and he doesn't want to have to compete for our love with anything else. So, okay, so back in, I'm going to give them, Brittany, you go back to slide 24, and I'll just give you the cross-reference on
I have no idea what numbers.
slide 24.
What is it? I don't have the numbers on it. How do I know what
Oh.
numbers?
Isaiah. Okay. This, I should have given you this, but this is what he's quoting when he says, lift your drooping hands. He's quoting this from Isaiah 35:3-4. So verses 12 through 17, where he says, lift your drooping hands, lift drooping hands and strengthen weak knees, is Isaiah 35:3-4. Say to those who have an anxious heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. With the recompense of God, he will come and save you. So he's repeating that. He's telling them. He's using the words of Isaiah to encourage them. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so discussion. Oh, me.
Who was that quote by?
Matthew Henry.
Henry.
Do I need to have Brittany put it back up? You get it?